Life Audio.
Hello, and welcome to the Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic podcast. I am your host, John Seidel. This is your home for real stories, radical vulnerability, and remarkable comebacks. In the end, this podcast is a place for the desperate, the downtrodden, the destitute, and especially the drunk. But it's also a place of hope and healing. I know that firsthand because I'm the Christian who became an alcoholic, not the other way around. Today, I've found sobriety after decades of struggling. But more importantly than finding sobriety, I found Jesus. My prayer is that as I interview people just like you and just like me, along with professionals in the fields of trauma, faith, and addiction recovery, you will find the peace that is available to you through Christ on the other side of whatever you're going through and whatever addiction that might be. Because let's face it, we're all addicted to something. So welcome. Let's get radically vulnerable as we explore what it looks like to be on this journey of messy sanctification. We'll be right back after this. If you're listening to this, it's likely that you are looking for motivation. It's likely that you are wanting to make a change in your life. And chances are it's hard, right? Like, it is hard to make a change. And I want to first applaud you for the change that you're trying to make. And if you need motivation, I especially want you to listen to our guest today. Stephanie Ziebell got sober in the capital of drinking culture, ground zero for drunkenness. And if she can do it, you can too. Not just by willpower, not just by pulling yourself up from your bootstraps. As you will hear in Stephanie's story, that wasn't possible. The whole, like, I can do this on my own led to a lot of starts and stops and failures. But when she finally added Jesus to the equation, she was able to find sobriety in Wisconsin, which is the drunkest state in the union. You know this if you've been listening to this podcast for a little bit, because I'm from Wisconsin originally, even though I don't live there now. And the drunkest counties in the country are in Wisconsin. My hometown is right in the heart of it. Stephanie is going to share her story about getting sober in and amidst that culture. But her story is interesting for more than just that, because it also involves the fact that, like, what do you do when rock bottom isn't your rock bottom? Like, think about that. What do you do when rock bottom isn't your rock bottom? See, Stephanie has a story where she thought she hit rock bottom. She really did. And rock bottom was still deeper. And what I love about Stephanie's story is there are so many facets to it. There was the party girl in college, right, that drank and then swore it off and got sober for a little bit, right? All throughout law school, she was sober. And then it crept back in. Oh, I'm not gonna be the drunk party girl anymore. I'm just gonna be the sophisticated wine woman. And then it got worse and worse and worse. There were the 3 a.m. panic attacks. There were the texts to her boss after drunken nights on work trips that said, you know what? I'm an alcoholic and I need help. And so I think especially this is an episode for those women who are working, those women who are moms, working moms especially, who so often culture tells you that if you that you deserve to get drunk at the end of the day. And maybe it's not saying drunk, but it's saying, hey, you deserve your few glasses of wine, and you know where that leads, right? You know the escape that leads to. And so I'm excited to welcome Stephanie to the podcast and have her share her story. She has an incredible platform called Radiant in Battle on Instagram, and she shares just really encouraging thoughts and videos And I think you're going to be really encouraged by this episode. Before we get to the interview, though, it's a big day today. This is the week, I should say, of my book launch, Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic. And so the reason that you're listening to this podcast is because of the book. And, had this book idea, wrote it over about a year ago, and then you go through the process of editing. And it is my story. It's the raw story of coming to the end of myself and falling in the pit and realizing that I had parts of myself that were walled off from Jesus and had not let him in, because there were successful parts of myself, healthy parts of myself that wrote a Christian best-selling book. But then there were those other parts that I didn't, and those parts became an alcoholic. And I would be honored if you picked up the book today. It is no longer for pre-order. It is now, you order it and it comes. And if you're a Prime member, it'll come fairly quickly. So you can go to Amazon. You can go to my website, christianalcoholic.com. Not only is it my story, but it's a 4-step process to break free from drinking and doing the things you don't want to do. So maybe that's not alcohol for you. Maybe that's something else. And the book will help you do that. And I would be honored if you would pick it up and let me know what you think, if it helps you. The principles in the book are a lot of the principles that Stephanie is going to talk about today, about what finally brought her from not just one rock bottom, but 2 rock bottoms back to Jesus. And so I'm excited for this interview. Take a listen, and I'll see you on the other side. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining the Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic podcast and for your willingness to tell your story. I think this age of social media is so fascinating and interesting, right? Like, we've never met, we've chatted on Instagram, we follow each other, we've liked each other's stuff. And I said, I got to get this woman on my podcast because I just loved what you've been posting. So I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. Look forward to sharing my story.
Yeah. And so before we get into that, I think, a crucial part of my book is talking, or let me say this. I wanted to get into this more in my book. I couldn't, but yet it is a crucial part. And that is, I don't think people quite understand the drinking culture in Wisconsin. And that's where you're from. That's where I'm from. And when we look at the drunkest counties in the country, it's Wisconsin. It's the drunkest state. It's just a way of life like nothing else. Maybe start out by describing that for the audience who may not have the pleasure of being from the Badger State.
Sure. I guess, yeah, for me, it just feels, sort of normal. It's just always been a part of life here. Growing up, it was at every family gathering. And just, it would be an odd family gathering, I would say, even if we were just getting together to watch the Packer game on a Sunday afternoon. It would be weird if there wasn't alcohol there. And I think I experienced it the most when I moved away from Wisconsin. After college, I lived in Ohio for 3 years, and it wasn't as obvious to me until I returned to Wisconsin. And every time I would come home on breaks, our weekend, everything we did, it was just, alcohol was a huge part of it. Even, the things we do for fun, like bowling. You can't really go bowling. You can't be on a bowling league in Wisconsin unless you're ready to take shots,
Yeah.
Pretty much every other frame. Like I mentioned, the Packer parties, if you're watching at a bar, every time there's a touchdown, they're going to pass around green shots.
Yep.
It's just, it's very ingrained in our culture, definitely. And it just feels normal. But I think once you step outside of it and go live somewhere else for a while, you realize that it's not like that everywhere.
Right. Yeah, I remember, I think people have heard me tell this story and I talk about it in the book, but, when my wife and I's first argument was about having alcohol at our wedding. We got married down in Texas. I'm asking my entire family to fly down And my wife, comes from a more strict upbringing and just cannot understand. And my father-in-law calls up a friend of his that was from down south who was pastoring in Green Bay and said, "What is going on? Why is my son-in-law so adamant about having alcohol at the wedding?" And that pastor says, my father-in-law's name is Brian. He says, "Brian, not having alcohol at the wedding is like not having a bride in Wisconsin."
Yeah.
I mean, it's like it just doesn't compute,
Right. Yeah. No, I can't imagine a wedding in Wisconsin without alcohol. It's funny you bring that up. My husband and I were just talking about our wedding. We had like a certain allotted amount of money and we could use, towards certain things in this package. And I really wanted a chocolate fountain. Um, and at the time of our wedding, I was not drinking. So I was sober and I was like, I don't care about having an open bar. I want a chocolate fountain. And, I didn't win that argument. We had open bar for all of our guests or whatever. And, we were talking about it last night and I kind of said, I still miss that chocolate fountain. You said, yeah, but people would probably not have come to our wedding. Like if we didn't have that, and they talk about it as one of, the most fun times that they had. And it's, it's sad to think about that. I'm like, oh, people loved my wedding because of the open bar, but.
And really, that's the discussion in Wisconsin. The discussion in Wisconsin is not, are you going to have alcohol at the wedding? The discussion is it open bar or is it cash bar?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I'm glad you gave a little color there, but really, one of the things I like to do with this podcast is just open it up for people to tell their stories and how, I know how in my recovery, how important that was to hear people. And maybe there are some people who will hear this story and they'll say, hey, great, but maybe they can't relate. But maybe, and I think likely, there will be people who hear your story and can relate and say, oh, me too. I'm not that crazy. There is hope. So I would love for you to just walk us through your story from start to finish and where you are today.
All right. I appreciate the opportunity to do that. So I guess I'll start, around the time when I feel like alcohol really entered my life. And in Wisconsin, sometimes that happens early. So it was a long time ago. Basically in high school. Probably started in middle school, but in high school, I could already tell that I was just a little bit different than everybody else. I remember distinctly one of like the first high school parties where it's probably like midnight or something and everybody else is basically passing out, and I did not want to go to bed and I wanted to keep drinking. And that's sort of been like the theme of my life as it relates to alcohol. Once I would start, I always wanted to keep going until some kind of external force prevented me from continuing. And usually that was passing out. So from a very long time ago, that was always what I noticed about myself. Obviously going to college in Madison, I had a lot of experiences with being, out as my roommates would go back to the dorms. I'd find somewhere else to go.
And if people don't realize this, like Madison, University of Wisconsin-Madison, the main campus, is frequently named the number one party school in the nation.
Yeah. Yeah. And we were, proud of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a badge of honor in Wisconsin.
Yeah. Yeah. And we lived up to that, me and my roommates. But again, it was always, we partied, but I always kind of took it to, a level that it didn't need to go to. And at times that led to trouble for me. I had, I had at one point in college a disorderly conduct on UW grounds for, dispute with one of my roommates. And it just never led to anything good in my life. It was always causing problems. And so the point at which I decided to get help was a night where we had some kind of, it was just a college event. It was some kind of arts event. And they were, I think at that time, I was 21 and they were serving alcohol. So we had, drinks, me and my roommates. And then afterwards, I'm pretty sure it was a Wednesday night. Everybody went back home and, they were done for the night, but I wanted to keep drinking. Um, and I ended up going to Tellurine, UCAN, which is a detox facility outside of Madison, because of the way the events unfolded that night. I ended up having to go there by police escort because
Wow.
it was not the first time that I had an incident that involved the Madison police. And so thankfully, it wasn't any kind of like jail or any kind of criminal issue, but just I think because of the concern of the level of alcohol consumption, they took me there. And so that was where I went to my first AA meeting. So it was kind of forced upon me. I didn't have to go to the meeting, but they were coming in, from the outside to have a meeting there. And I thought, well, I'm here. Nothing else I can do. I guess I'll listen in. And that was like light bulbs went off when these people started talking.
Mm.
I thought I was, crazy or something was wrong with me that I couldn't figure out how to control my drinking. But then I would hear these other stories and I remember thinking in that moment, like, okay, I'm done with alcohol because I don't want to be somebody coming into one of these meetings when I'm 50 and still struggling. And so I really committed to that and I
And that
graduated.
was how long ago?
So that would have been in 2007 when
Okay.
I graduated from college. And then I moved to Ohio, and it was really easy to stay sober in
Mhm.
Ohio. I went to law school there until 2011 was when I moved back to Wisconsin, got married. Um, Shortly after the wedding, I'd say alcohol started kind of creeping back into my life.
What did
It's
that look like? What did creep, because you didn't have, or you were not, you were going to
yeah,
have just the chocolate fountain, right?
right. Yeah,
And
exactly. I didn't
so,
drink at my wedding. I was not drinking at that point. Yeah.
so how did
Um,
it start creeping back in? Was it just, I think I can handle this, or how long have you been sober at that point?
so that would have been 4 years. I was sober for 4 years in my mid 20s, which is a very hard time, I would say, to be sober,
Yeah.
early 20s. But I was so focused on law school and I wanted to be top of my class. So I really poured my energy into that. And then moving back, it was kind of like I passed the bar, I got a job. I was married, I didn't really have that one thing that I was like, okay, I got to pour my energy into this. And so I think the social scene with that, and also I think as you get a little bit older too, I don't know, at least for me, it felt like wine entered the picture
Mm.
as, more of a, well, you can probably, have a glass of wine. And if you can control that,
It's a little
it's
more
going to be okay.
sophisticated, a
Exactly.
little more
I'm not
socially acceptable,
right, I'm
even.
not taking shots, I'm not
Right.
drinking a 24 pack of Miller Lite, not playing beer pong.
Yeah.
I wrote off beer. I said I'll never drink beer again, and that was my rule, so I only drank wine. Um, and I'd say, it was probably okay for a few years.
Okay, being what? You would have one glass or two? Like, what did that look like?
I could probably have I guess I would say it was okay in the sense that I didn't do it often. So at first it was like just special occasions,
Mhm.
So my friend's bachelorette party, my bachelorette party, actually, that was before the wedding. I did drink there. It was like it would kind of come in like certain instances. But it was never to the point where I felt like, oh gosh, this is out of hand again. It would be more like I'd wake up and, oh, I probably had a couple too many, but it wasn't terrible.
Uh,
Um, but I still felt like every time I drank, it was this massive, like, endeavor to really make sure that I didn't let it get out of hand.
mm,
Um, and I think it's honestly, I would say from like 2014 to 2020 is somewhat of a blur in the sense that during that time period, I, was trying not to drink. And then I also had, during that time period, 3 pregnancies in which I didn't drink. But also during that time period, 4 kids. Um, and so there's a lot, that I felt like it's just kind of a blur, but it kept getting worse. Um, where like I wouldn't drink that much, it wasn't often early on, but as it got closer to, um, I would say COVID, I think I spent the entire 9 months leading up to the birth of my twins in 2020, like really feeling deprived, like
Yeah.
because I think especially because of the pandemic too. I remember posting on Facebook once, at least you can all drink wine, because I was pregnant. I couldn't drink. And so I think that in my head was like, um, it was a stressful time for everyone. And as soon as they were born, they were in the NICU for 3 weeks and I couldn't
Mm.
stay with them. So I was kind of home. And I think within 2 days, I was having a margarita, it was Cinco de Mayo, so it was like,
Yeah.
um, and then that summer, I just feel like kind of just forgot about the rules. Like it wasn't, okay.
Summer of 2020, right?
Yeah, it
I
wasn't,
mean, I
there
think a lot
wasn't,
of people forgot about the rules
right.
in summer of
Exactly.
2020.
I mean, I don't know. There were nights where like my whole family would be sleeping, including my twin babies, and I would be up drinking all night. And then, trying to somehow manage the next day with 2 twin newborns, feeling hungover. And um, that I think was definitely the beginning of the downfall. Like, and that was already a pretty big low at that point. It was just
Which
a hard time.
I think, I just want to point this out because I think it's important for people to hear is that, you talk about this period between 2014 and 2020. And I have a similar period in my life where I talk about 2021, fall of 2021 to spring of 2023 as being the really bad period. And yet, from very similar to you, from probably 2012 to 2021, like it was up, it was down, it was up, it was down, it was good, it was bad. And yet there were some really bad things that happened during that time, right? It just wasn't as consistent.
Right.
And for me at least, and it sounds like that's kind of what you're saying too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would say, yeah, that stretch, right before having kids and then up until, throughout all of their childhoods, basically. It just felt like here and there, like it was not great, not a great
Right.
time, I would say.
Right.
But it wasn't consistently bad. Whereas once 2020 hit, then it was like the drinking was more often. And every time I drank,
Yes.
it was not good.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, because I think, we can get more into this, I'm sure, but I think for me at least, because it wasn't every time I drank it was bad, or maybe there were periods of good.
Yeah.
I played the comparison game, right? So, well, obviously if I had a big problem, it would be every time, or it would look like this, or it would look like that, or I would be doing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm fine, right? But so then tell us summer of 2020 happens, and talk about then kind of that period after that.
Yeah. So then I think, I went back to work and, there was just some nights, I would say like election night where, I'd stay up all night or, where I would be drinking more on the weeknights, which was not something I did in the past ever really. Like that, I don't know, that to me, I think was a combination of, COVID and working from home for the first time ever. I kind of used to have this rule in my head, like I wouldn't drink, if I had to work the next day or something. And when 2020 came around, that kind of went out the window because I didn't have to get up and go anywhere and get ready. No one could really tell if I was hungover behind a computer screen,
Right.
I'm sure they could, but I thought they couldn't. So that's kind of how 2020 and 2021 went. And then I think what the big, like, I would say the biggest turning point for me was, or the starting point of this, story and how it's led me to where I am today, was that in January of 2022, we had a sales conference in Nashville, and we hadn't had one the year before because of COVID. So I kind of went into that forgetting that I was the general counsel of my company. And I went into that looking for a release. Like,
Mm.
I partied, that whole weekend, basically. And I didn't show up the way I was supposed to show up or the way I should have showed up. And that really hit me hard. I felt really bad about that when I came back. I felt like I had let my family down and let my, colleagues down and my boss down. And I really tried then, I think I knew in my head at that point, like, okay, you're not supposed to drink.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, you quit drinking when you were in your 20s. Why are you drinking again? This is what happens. And so I kind of knew it, but instead of saying, okay, I'm done, I'm going to quit drinking, I just tried really hard that year to control it. And I feel like I did a really good job of it. I always think about this one time, in May of 22, I went to a vineyard with my coworkers and we drank all day, and I actually controlled it really well. I ended the night with soda and a pizza and went to bed early. I didn't do anything embarrassing. Like, I kind of thought again in my head, oh, okay, so maybe I can do this.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
kept drinking because of that one time. Ignore all the other times where it's been horrible. That one time was what stuck in my head.
That, okay, this is why I love this podcast is I think there are plenty of us that have done that. I know I have, right? I mean, there were times I remember I went on a guys trip from all my friends from high school, and we all went to New Orleans, and it was like a 24-hour trip, right? In and out. And that night, everyone else got wasted. I got buzzed, right?
Mm-hmm.
But guess who was the first one back to the hotel? Me. And I walked back to the hotel. They all stayed out until the wee hours of the morning. And I can't tell you how much in my mind I used that one time that I had restraint to justify so many other moments of unrestraint,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because obviously I'm good,
Yeah.
and so to hear that you did that too, I think there's probably a lot of people listening that have done that.
Yep. Yeah. I think it's just the way that alcohol kind of plays tricks on us in our mind. And, it's very cunning, and it wants us to stay, wants us, to keep drinking. And so it finds its ways to convince your mind that, there's no problem.
We'll be right back after this. And I think also you said something important too. And I know I experienced this, and I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that have that. There's a moment where I realized, I need to stop, or I can't do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is not, like, I have an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. And, I don't know when that first happened in my life, but it was way before I stopped drinking, And so I think it's like, we know, even if and I think, by the way, there's a difference between knowing and admitting it, right? Like, I knew I needed to stop drinking way earlier, but I wouldn't admit it, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
even at that time, right after that conference, I started seeing a counselor, and I told her, what happened or whatever. And I remember her asking me, like, so is alcohol the problem here? And I just wasn't honest with her. I said, well, I used to struggle with alcohol in the past, but I don't think that's it. I think it's more just, the stress of being a working mom, and just kind of brushed over it, and here I am talking to somebody who's supposed to help me, and I couldn't even be honest with her about it. And really, I knew alcohol was the problem, but
Yeah.
just didn't want to admit it, like you said.
So you go through 2022, I think you said, and you're cutting back, and you're living off that one time that you
Yeah.
said that you had restraint, and then what does it look like, and where does it go?
So then December of 2022, another work event, and just fell right back down to where I started. It's that same old story, like not wanting to go to bed, getting and this is a problem I had in college that I hadn't seen for a long time, but I started to get confrontational,
Mm,
really argumentative, not nice.
mm,
Started to, when I was drinking, I didn't really realize it until somebody would tell me the next day, but wasn't acting like myself. Just trying to argue with people. I don't know. And so that kind of continued. And I think I was really upset with myself at that point because 2022, I felt like I had done such a great job. And then all of a sudden at the end of the year, I felt like I screwed up again. And then we had another sales conference, and I went into that one telling everyone, okay, I'm not going to drink. Um, and I did okay the first 2 nights there. And then the last night was up all night, missed the conference in the morning.
mm.
Just same old story. And at that point, I just kind of said, screw it. Like, this is who I'm always going to be. Never going to be able to change. And it was, I think in that moment, like, I was mad at myself again for not being able to control it, but still not admitting that the answer was to stop drinking alcohol completely. Um, and I didn't get there until another work event in July of 2023. Um, And it was, again, another really bad night. And, you know, now my boss has been through this with me, like 3 or 4 times, right? And I woke up at 3 in the morning with that panic, like,
Yes.
whoa, what happened last night?
Yes.
And I was just like, I really screwed up this time. And so I remember waiting a little while before I texted him. And then when I finally talked to him, I said to him, like, I am an alcoholic and I have struggled with this my entire life and I haven't been honest with you about it. And I really want to get help. And um, I called my pastor as well, one of my pastors, and she was really supportive and talked about Celebrate Recovery. And I at that moment in time, I decided, like, I have to do this. I want more for my life than this. I'm, letting everybody around me down. I've built a really successful life and I'm going to throw it all away. And then I thought back to that first AA meeting where I said I didn't want to be that 50-year-old coming in there still drinking every day. And so it was kind of like it all came together in that moment. It was, a do or die kind of decision. And so I just decided I'm going to commit to it. I know it's going to be hard. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I know that God will get me through this. He's brought me this far and saved me from so many things. This can't be the end of the story.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where the change began then. And um, that
What
was the last night I drank.
what that I think we've all had those 3 a.m. panic sessions, and they look different, right? Meaning maybe it wasn't a 3 a.m. panic session for someone listening, but we've all had that type of thing, right? What did I text? Who did I call? I get very talkative when I got drunk at night, especially towards the end when I was getting drunk every night, and I'd make phone calls, and I'm talking to people. I'm having conversations that the next morning I'm like, I know I called them. What did I say? What did we
Right.
talk about?
Right.
So what was it that, I mean, you said you admitted to your boss. What was that like?
It felt, honestly, in that moment, I'm not gonna lie, it didn't feel super empowering. I
Mm,
felt like a big failure.
mm,
Um, I think there's a lot of stigma attached to that word alcoholic.
right.
And so it was hard to say that. I felt like, and I also felt to, because it was a work situation, I thought in my mind, like, are they going to believe me, or are they going to think I'm just saying this, so that I don't get in trouble? Um, but it was the truth, and,
Yeah.
so in that exact moment, and the days after that, I felt, you know, like a failure. I didn't feel very confident, strong. I was pretty depressed. I
Yep.
feel like those, first couple of days where you're kind of going through that, there's a grieving process too. Like
Amen.
you just your old life is gone. I and you can't help but think about forever. It's like,
Oh,
okay,
yep.
I can never go back to alcohol ever again. And so it's just a really emotional, difficult time, I would say, but it's so important too. Um, I feel like for personal growth, like if we were all just able to magically quit drinking, gosh, we really wouldn't grow much at all. We wouldn't have these stories
Mm,
where we learn about ourselves and where we help others. So I just kind of view it as it was a bad memory of mine, but it's part of my story and it's made me who I am today. So I don't look back on it with like a negative connotation as hard as it was in the moment. I look back on it and I just see it's just a part of my story. And um, I think it also gives, in that moment, it gave other people an opportunity to kind of showcase their love and support, because obviously that could have gone a totally different direction where, my boss said I've had enough. And he would have had every right to say that, but he didn't. And
mm,
I think my company has been super supportive of it. And so it, gives me a platform to talk about how other people really showed up for me too.
yeah. Um, so I'm curious, you said you talked to your pastor. What was her, what was that conversation like?
She already had some knowledge of my situation, because she prayed with me before my sales conference in January of 2023. Went over to her house and we prayed together. And I remember feeling like, I let her down
Mm,
because I drank at that sales conference. And I remember she was checking in on me the whole weekend. And for the most part, it was good. And then that final day, it was just kind of like, well, today I drank and, I said it wasn't that bad, but it was.
yeah.
So she already kind of knew, that there were problems. So calling her in that moment, that that was easier, I think, than talking to my boss, because she already knew the background and because I felt like I could trust her, and I
Mm-hmm.
felt like I was going to someone safe and just saying, okay, I don't know what to do. I need some help, and whatever you can do to help me, I would appreciate it, and she had a lot of ideas right away. So I think that one wasn't as difficult. I still don't know if I would call it empowering, but it was, I guess sort of a step towards someone that I felt I
Yeah.
could trust in that moment.
What do you think it is? I mean, obviously, I'm a Christian. I struggle with this. You're a Christian. You struggle with this. Um, and I mean, I know the answer for me, right? And I know the answer that I think is good. But I like asking this to everyone. Really, is how do you feel like you justified it as a Christian, or was it, did you compartmentalize it? Well, this is, what was it like to be an alcoholic as a Christian, where
Hmm.
hey, not supposed to get drunk, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of compartmentalizing, a lot of, and with that, like, justification by, the things that you see around you, whether it's the media. I mean, for me, this sounds weird, but country music was one of the things that I would use to justify my drinking.
Same.
Yeah,
I
because you
stopped
do.
listening to it.
Yeah, I don't really anymore. I mean, it's kind of triggering for me.
You
But
don't really like once I stopped drinking, I was like, it's every song has
yeah,
some alcohol or drinking reference. It's insane.
right. But they also, at the same time, many of them would sing about Jesus. So in my mind, I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
there's a Miranda Lambert song, like I know something about Jesus and he drank wine, I think
Yep.
would get along, that kind of stuff where it's like, okay, well, they're Christian and they follow Jesus, but they drink.
Mm-hmm.
Silly justification like that, or just your family too. Both of my parents quit drinking after my wedding, because they didn't have great nights at my wedding. Um,
The open bar.
exactly, yes. But they've stopped drinking. But I think growing up, like I said, it was everywhere in my family. So that was often in my mind too, is that, it's okay because this is just how my family is. And um, I think as it got closer to the end, though, it was really hard for me to justify because of the fact that I was growing so much in my faith. Um, at the end of it's so weird how this story kind of plays out because at the end of 2019, that was when I committed to read the Bible every day.
Mm.
And I started doing that in 2020. And that is kind of when everything went off the rails. And so I always think about that. Like, did God know things were going to go off the rails? And is that why he put that,
Mm.
desire in my heart to read the Bible every day so I would be prepared? Or did I decide to start reading the Bible every day and then the devil came and attacked me? I
Yeah.
don't know what the answer is, but I will say once we got to 2020, it was a lot harder for me to justify it because I was growing in my faith because
Yeah.
I was reading the Bible every day.
And I think that's where the spiritual warfare aspect comes in. I think that's where the disease aspect comes in, right? Like,
Mhm.
I don't want to discount that, right? It's not,
Yeah.
this is not just a moral
Oh,
failing or
yeah.
a moral thing. It's,
Hmm.
I think some people like to say it's either or. I think it's both and it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, at some point the disease takes over,
Right. Yes,
and,
definitely.
you're able to, once, even when you can't justify it, it's like, my body wants it. My body needs it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, so you finally decide, okay, I'm done. What did that look like, and what did getting in recovery look like for you?
So yeah, I think I had a family camping trip planned for the following week, and so I remember back to that like it was kind of you know thoughts all over the place, but I remember also feeling really depressed. Was not the best family trip ever. And we still had fun, but that was on my mind, the whole time is that okay, not going to drink here while we're camping. So I started immediately getting into the sparkling water cuz that was a nice replacement for me and that did help. Um and my husband was very supportive. He didn't drink at all on that camping trip, which was nice. And then
It's the ultimate act of love in Wisconsin.
it is. Yes. But then when I got back, it was, I had to go to that first Celebrate Recovery meeting. It was on a Thursday night. And it was at a church that I had never been to before. The church I go to doesn't have a Celebrate Recovery program. So it was a little scary. I had to go out to Waukesha, just 20 minutes from where I live and walk into a building I wasn't familiar with and find the room and meet people that I didn't really know. But as soon as I walked in, I felt like, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I continued to go to Celebrate Recovery every week. I also saw a counselor again, and this time I was very honest with the counselor and did that for several months. And, just slowly started building the new life and trying to embrace it and finding other things to fill the time. Um, because at first, it can feel like, just sort of feels like some, it's like a big piece of your life is just sucked away, and it's like you're kind of left with this weird emptiness. A lot of people call it boredom. Um, I don't know if I ever really get bored. I always feel like I have so much to do that it's hard to say I was bored, but I just felt, yeah, there's of a vacuum there that you
Absolutely.
feel like you need to fill. So that's also, part of my story too, is that I did start to fill it, even though, I wasn't drinking and that was great, but I was spending a lot of time online shopping on my phone. And I felt like after Black Friday-ish of 2023, I thought, okay, well, that's Black Friday, that's when you shop. But then I kept doing it, and it wasn't probably until like March of 2024 I remember praying, and I wrote it down in my journal, like, I know I'm spending too much time and money shopping,
Mm,
and I didn't quit drinking, to find something else that's gonna be
yes.
unhealthy,
Yes.
to replace it. So I remember asking God if he would help me find something more productive and impactful that I could fill my time with. And I don't know how it happened, but he led me to Instagram. Um, I never had an account before. I had an account, but I never used it. And so in March of 2024, I just kind of started posting, and I don't know, it just turned into something I never really expected. And I wish that I had had this community and known about it so many years ago. I think it would have been so helpful. But
Yeah.
again, it's all part of the story.
And so you are now on Instagram. Your handle is Radiant in Battle. Explain the name.
Yeah. So it's from Psalms 34:5. I always get so nervous when I have to quote scripture, but it's something along the lines of those who look to him are radiant. Their faces will never be covered in shame. That's not an exact quote, but
That's
that's
okay. I like the
essentially.
Stephanie,
Thank you.
paraphrase. That's great.
Yeah, that's what it is, paraphrased. But that's kind of the idea, is that no matter what you're going through, as long as you are looking to Jesus, you will never, you should never live in shame. And that's one of the hardest things I think about people who, struggle with alcohol. And I know this was true for me for so many years. You just live in this constant state of shame. At some
Yes.
point, at some point in our journey, when you get to that point where like my relationship with alcohol is not good. And you can admit that in your mind, even if you don't say it outwardly to anyone. And when you know that,
Mm-hmm.
it's just a lot of shame, those mornings where you wake up and you're like, what did I do? I mean, I can't tell you how many times I told myself, like, God, how could you do this again? You're such an idiot. I called
Yeah.
myself an idiot so many times.
Oh, yes.
You just hate
I
yourself.
always put a little emphasis before idiot.
Yeah. Did you? Yeah. Yeah, I had a lot of not so nice things to say to myself.
Absolutely.
But honestly, my husband, like he's seen all of it. He's been with me. Since college. We started dating then. He's seen everything, and he's just really embodied that idea of grace and taught me what it is. Because I
Mm,
know he didn't like my drinking and how I acted at many, many times. But he never ever like yelled at me, or he never even said like, this needs to change. It was just the way he would go about the conversations. And it's hard to put into words, because I feel like that's what grace is. It's like, it's hard to
mhm.
explain, but that's what we need to do with ourselves. And so that's what Jesus does for us too. So when you are struggling with alcohol and you feel like you hate yourself, you really got to switch that mindset and go to Jesus and ask
Yes.
him, you know, what do
Yes.
you
And
say about me?
we'll be right back after this. I'm glad you brought up your husband, because I think there are some people that have I would say family members or loved ones of people who are like us, who don't understand, just struggle with, what do I do? What do I
Right.
say? Where was your husband? Where was your wife during this? And I can say, and I'd be curious, I think you alluded to it as well, is that my wife was there running the house because I was absent. My wife was picking up the pieces. My wife was lovingly trying to have the conversation in a way that wouldn't push me away.
Mhm.
And I tell people, like, there are some people who may need an intervention, right? Like, I'm not going to tell you
Yeah.
exactly what route to take. My wife knew that would have just pushed me away, right? And she also knew, and we were talking about this last night because I was trying to give some counsel to someone about this subject. And I said to the person, I said, you know, you may have to pray for patience and long suffering because um, their spouse needs to make the decision themselves. It has to be between them and the Holy Spirit, because if they make it for you, or they feel forced into it, maybe they get sober, and maybe that lasts for a little bit, maybe that lasts for a while. But ultimately, I don't think it will last, or it won't be a fulfilling
Mhm.
sobriety journey, because it's not done between them and the Lord.
Right.
And my wife is like, yep, exactly. She's like, I went through a lot more pain in the immediate, but now the transformation is so much better than I ever could imagine, because I wasn't sitting there nagging you or whatnot. It's a genuine transformation. And so it
Mhm.
sounds like that's kind of what your husband did as well.
Yes. Yeah. He's was very patient with me, and definitely no nagging or pushing me to go to any kind of support groups or anything like that. Acknowledging, that there was a problem, definitely. Um, but yeah, it just wasn't anything forceful. And so I think when you feel pressured or shamed into making a change, you resent it then,
Yeah.
you know? And that's the same, like I said about my boss, that's kind of the same thing. It was not okay, well, you need to do this and this and this, or, you're done. I mean, of course, it's a workplace, so there's some of those parameters.
Uh-huh.
But it was more about, forget the work stuff. Like, I want you to get better, you
Yeah.
know, and that motivates you to change versus, you know, the trying to force someone into it, or making them feel bad about themselves. That just doesn't work. I mean, I've learned that enough with the way I talk to myself. I never
Mm-hmm.
made any meaningful change when I was mean to myself. It was only when I started to acknowledge, my human frailty and the disease, the fact of, it actually being a brain disease, and understanding that, I was just wired differently, and it doesn't mean that I'm a terrible person. All of that, I think that's when you actually start to move towards transformation.
Mm-hmm. What were when your husband would bring it up to you? What was how would you handle that? What would you say?
I guess I don't even know really if he had to bring it up to me, because I was very. Because he knew everything, there was nothing I needed to hide from him. So it was like I would wake up in the morning and I would bring it up right away and be like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that again," or "I'm really sorry," kind of thing. And most of the time it was in the mix of feeling physically awful, So I would kind of bring it up, and it it was just, kind of an understanding response, like an acknowledgement of, yeah, it was a rough night, you
Uh-huh.
know? But if I complained of a headache, he'd bring me Tylenol or ibuprofen and water, or, you should probably drink some Gatorade, or he'd order food for me, which, like, the converse, I think, and unfortunately, this, I think, is a sad reality for many people. Um, and I'm so sorry if anyone listening to this is struggling with this, but where, the other spouse is really condemning, like, I'm not going to get you medicine, get yourself medicine. You put yourself in this situation. That's not going to help at
Uh,
all. That's just going to make the person feel worse and worse, and they're just going to keep drinking or using or doing whatever they do. I think it's, the Jesus way, which is kind of the opposite of what society expects and what
uh,
society tells us, that you get what you deserve. The Jesus way is that you get what you don't deserve. You go above and beyond to help someone and to love someone even when they don't deserve it. even when they may have made really poor choices and got themselves into a mess, you know?
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
How would you describe your life now, especially as a mother, as a wife? What's the difference in your life now?
A lot less stress, I will say that. I don't know if it's hard to say exactly why, if that was just because removing alcohol removed the stress. I do think there was a lot of stress because of the alcohol. It was kind of this vicious cycle of feeling like there's so much to do every single day, and I would tell myself like, I just can't do it all. So as soon as Friday rolled around, it was kind of like, all right, now I can relax. But then I wouldn't really relax. Drinking, it sounds relaxing, but being hungover all weekend is actually quite taxing, you know?
Yeah.
So then
Right.
you wake up Monday and you're not rested. You didn't get anything done over the weekend. And so, yeah, your week's stressful again. Now I feel like I have the time and the capacity to get things done. And I enjoy spending time with my family more.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I hate to say that I used to look forward to the work trips, and now it's more like I like to be home with my
Yeah.
kids. And I will say, I'll preface that by saying that my twins are now 4 years old and my older boys are 7 and 9. It's a different lifestyle than when you have 4 kids under 5. So there's something there too that just naturally life has become easier, and I find more joy in it. But I also think I would say drinking is more than 50% of it, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huge transformation just because of removing the alcohol. I don't have to spend time thinking about it, worrying about it anymore. It's just not an obstacle in my life, and that's very freeing every day.
Have you found, and I don't think there's a right answer to this because I say I can answer this both ways depending on the day, but have you found for yourself that the desire is gone? Or is it still there? And by God's grace, you don't give in. I think for me, some days I can say, man, I haven't thought about it in weeks. And then there are sometimes I'm like, man, I could really use a drink, Now,
Yeah.
not really use a drink. That's the lies, right? But
Right.
so depending on the day, I answer that differently. I'm curious for you.
Yeah. I think most of the time it's not really a thought. Um, I think when I was in my 20s, it was more of a thought because I didn't have the same mindset that I do now. I think back then I still viewed it as deprivation and I can't drink. I think the sober Instagram community has actually been a big help in allowing me to realize that wanting to be able to control your drinking it's a really odd goal to have in life. That
Mm,
I wish that I could control this, poisonous substance so that I could still ingest it. I have a different mindset now. I'm grateful that I don't have to drink alcohol. It's just not a part of my life, and I don't ever want to drink again because why would I guess I'm at this mindset where it's like, why would I want to? Life is really good
yeah.
without it, and it's only ever made things worse. Um, but to your point about depending on the day, I will say that New Year's Eve, it was not difficult for me. I didn't want to drink, but I did feel triggered more than I had
Yeah.
any other day this year. I think it's just in an environment where there was some drinking, and um, I don't know. It just kind of I went through a lot of NA beers that night. I'll say that.
Yeah. Right.
I did.
Right.
But that's okay. It's nice to have the replacement and just, to be able to remind yourself, like, I know for a fact that drinking will never make anything better. It's only going to make it worse. So as much as my brain might tell me that I want to drink, I know the truth now. Whereas in the past, like, it was so hard to see past those lies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was really difficult to remember the bad parts about drinking. All I could ever see was the good, and now it's the reverse. I really don't see the good at all. There isn't really any. Um,
especially
think
with the latest
that,
science coming out, right?
yeah, exactly. So,
I love what you said about changing your mindset. I think that's really important. I wrote this piece. I said, I was finally able to stop drinking by stopping trying to stop drinking, right?
yeah.
Like where instead of the deprivation or doing it out of shame or whatnot, I finally pursued Jesus. And there are some people in the sobriety community that hate when I say this, and I'm like, I don't think it's that controversial, but I aimed for Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
and when I aimed for Jesus, I got sobriety, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Instead of aiming for sobriety and trying to white knuckle it, and there are some people that are just like, I have to, and I'm not disparaging meetings, but some people are like, I have to go to 2 meetings a day, and I'm just like, I wonder sometimes if that just sounds a lot like white knuckling it to me. And I don't want to disparage anyone's journey and mode of recovery, but I just have found that by aiming for Jesus, I got so much more thrown in and a way more fulfilling life than if
Mm-hmm.
I just tried to stop drinking,
Right. Yeah, I think when you aim for Jesus, you know that there's a greater purpose there. He's got a good plan for your life, and if you follow him, you'll get there. Whereas if you don't have that, it's kind of just, again, even if you're sober, you're going through the day to day. It's kind of going through the motions. Um, Whereas I feel like when you have that faith and you follow Jesus, he leads you down a much greater path where there's
Yeah.
so much more potential. I think when if you're just trying to stay sober every single day and that's your only focus, you're really pushing out so many other opportunities, and kind of narrowing your life to this one path. But I also, I I guess I don't know the degree to which everybody struggles, and I know that
Absolutely.
for some, if, it is so important to stay sober. And if that is what they need, then by all means, but I hope they know Jesus at some point along the way because he's amazing.
Yeah, that's a great point. And let me clarify that. It's like if you need 2 meetings a day in order to, not drink and not be slowly or sometimes very quickly killing yourself, like go to 2 meetings a day. Please hear me.
Mhm.
I want you. I have a family member right now that like they are in the very, very early stages of recovery, and I'm like, yes, go to do
Mm.
it, please, whatever you need right now, especially in the early stages to
Yeah.
in a sense kick the habit, right? But
Right.
then I want you to aim for Jesus, right?
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and those things aren't mutually exclusive.
Right.
I'm not saying they are. You can love Jesus and want to go to Jesus, and maybe you just like the people at your meetings and you're like, I'm just gonna, and you got the time, you're gonna hang out, great, do it. So Stephanie, what would you say to someone who is in, maybe like you, like me, who has that realization at some point that says, I know I'm not supposed to be drinking anymore, and yet says, I'll just cut back, or I'll control it. I have a friend right now, like he just doesn't want to say, and I get it. He doesn't want to say that he's done drinking forever. It's like, I'm taking a break and I'll just do it at special occasions. Right. And I'm praying for him and I'm hoping that that can be the case. In my experience, it's really hard, So what do you say to someone who has had that realization early, but is not ready to commit?
Yeah, I guess I would say just lean into that and don't run away from that. Um, I feel like a natural tendency is, to know that you shouldn't drink, but run away from it in the sense that, you don't want to face it head on. Because that means then you have to take action, right? So I would say lean into it and just pray about it and talk to God about what that means because he's got a different calling for everybody's life. And I'm not one of those people who thinks, that alcohol is the devil. I think it's a tool that the enemy uses against us. But I don't think the substance itself is evil. The same way I don't think money is evil, right? It's just how we react to it, how we treat it, if we idolize it. So I would take it from that perspective instead of worrying so much about, the worldly consequences of drinking and things like that. Just go to God with, do you want me to stop? Is there, can you tell me more about why you want me to stop? I have a friend who um, is not an alcoholic. Her husband is an alcoholic, and she felt like she wanted to quit drinking to support him. But in doing so, she said she became resentful, and she
Mm,
went to God with that and said, I don't think it's fair that I have to quit drinking because he has a problem. And she felt like God spoke to her and said, but when you drink, you forget about me. And so you never know when you're getting that feeling like, I know I probably shouldn't drink. Go to God with that, and maybe he'll tell you why. And maybe that
mhm.
will, expand your understanding a little bit more. Because I think when we know more about ourselves and our purpose as it relates to God's bigger plan, that's a better motivator for transformation than anything else. So
Yeah.
that would be my number one piece of advice, is really just to go to God with that and not run away from it. Um, and then, try to learn more about alcohol too and understand, maybe why it shouldn't be the goal to be able to continue drinking, because
Mm.
at the end of the day, it's really not good for you and generally only brings problems, and you can't enjoy life without it. And wouldn't it be better to get to a place where your goal isn't to be able to drink, and maybe just do it on special occasions, but your goal would be to get to a place where you have no desire to drink because you're full of joy and you love your life, no substances necessary.
Mhm. Oh, thank you. That's so good. Thank you for sharing that. As we wrap up here, if people want to check you out and be encouraged, where should they go?
My Instagram handle is Radiant in Battle, and there's an email address with that too. I have people just send me emails from time to time. It's radiantinbattle@gmail.com.
Awesome. Stephanie, thank you so much. Thank you for the courage, the
Yep.
radical vulnerability. We will all be praying for you as you continue the journey, especially I would say in the belly of the beast in
Yes.
Wisconsin,
I
where it can be just
Yeah.
feel like an uphill battle sometimes. But and when I'm back into town, I can't wait to get to know you and your husband, and I really appreciate you.
Yes. Thank you for having me. It's been great.
There are so many aspects of Stephanie's story that I resonate with. For starters, we share a sobriety month, July 2023, and close to each other's date as well. So I love that, right? I love the fact that she did a lot of comparison, right? Like that is it is such a universal experience for those of us who go through battling addictions. Well, I'm not going to drink wine. I'm not going to drink beer anymore. I'll just drink wine. Or, I've been really good. If I have a problem, I can't stop. So you know what? I'm going to let loose a little on this vacation. I mean, that's what led to my rock bottom. I had not drank for, I think, like 2 weeks before I went on my anniversary trip to Miami that I talk about in my book, where I hit rock bottom. And I said, you know what? I'm just gonna treat myself. And there's something that Stephanie has on her social media right now, and it's such a great thing. And I'm gonna steal it. Obviously, give her credit, but that if if you want to know how the devil can make addiction so attractive, is he would dress up sin as self-care. He would dress up sin as self-care. Dang, that's good. Right? Like so much, especially towards the end, it's like, you know what? I deserve this. I need just to not think about this. I need to relax. I need to just, get away. It's okay. Treat yourself, right? That's what everyone talks about now. If the devil were to be successful in entrapping and enslaving us. He would dress up sin as self-care, drunkenness as self-care. Ooh, as they say, that'll preach. So, what are the aspects of Stephanie's story that resonated with you? Let me know. 2 requests. 1, if anything in this podcast resonated with you, please share it. Even if it's 20 seconds, please send it to one person that you think could benefit from something in this podcast. Even if they have, don't struggle with alcohol. Even if they don't have a propensity towards the quote-unquote regular addictions. The truth is, we're all addicted to something because we all look for means of escape, to numb and to cope. And our sinful hearts want what our sinful hearts want. And we don't get it right 100% of the time. So there are those things. Second request, would you please, my book released yesterday, Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic. I would just ask that you purchase a copy. And if you don't think it could be useful for you, maybe just thumb through it and there will be someone that you know that can benefit from what is inside. This book is not just for alcoholics. It's not just for addicts. It's for everyone. Because like I said, we're all addicted to something. Thank you all. Love you. We'll be back next week for another episode. We have yet to miss a week. I just want to point that out. There are some weeks where I cut it close, where the editing or there was a problem detected, and I'm like, oh! We have not missed an episode. And now look, next week something's going to happen. But I'm praying it doesn't. So as they say down south, if the Lord tarries and the creek don't rise, we'll be back next week. See you then.